Welcome to the Hot Topics on the Edge of Show. I'm Richard Carthon. I'm here with my co-host January Jones. Today we have Josh Lawler coming back to join us with another awesome conversation. Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Always great to be here.
100%, man. This episode is brought to you by Realm. Realm crafts insurance solutions that give businesses in dynamic industries like Web3, AI, alternative medicine, biotech, and space economy the protection to innovate and thrive. Where emergent industries have previously battled uncertainty, Realm is making innovation resilient. And a quick note, the views expressed by Edge of Company do not necessarily reflect those of Realm.
Right. And none of this is legal advice or business advice, but I will actually give a shout out to Realm. Realm is a counterparty on a transaction that I'm doing, and they have actually behaved very well. So I have some firsthand experience that I think they're doing the right stuff. Unpaid.
Awesome.
Well, coming up today, we're going to talk about Ripple and the SEC, Senator Warren's crypto warning. We'll dig a little bit further into the White House crypto report, and we'll talk about Circle's announcement of their own blockchain.
This is another production of the Edge of Company, a rapidly growing media ecosystem empowering the pioneers of Web3 technology, culture, and innovation. Let's get started.
The SEC has dropped its planned appeal against Ripple, officially ending the lawsuit and resulting in Ripple paying a $125 million fine. This move aligns with the broader trend under the current SEC leadership in dismissing enforcement actions against other crypto entities like Coinbase and Binance. And while these cases have been dropped or resolved, the SEC still has a job to do in crypto to protect retail investors and the market in general. So what rules they come with soon, we don't know. It's still uncertain. It's likely to be crypto friendly. I want to throw this to you, Josh, to start out. Do you have generally any comments about the Ripple case? And where do you think the SEC should now be focusing their efforts on crypto regulation and enforcement?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that could take all of our time when you put it that way. It's very interesting. The fact that it's just kind of ended makes all kinds of sense politically, obviously. Major shift in administrative view, a major shift in, obviously presidential kind of pressure, everything of that nature. But the funny thing is that, what that means is that the Ripple district court finding is law. That's kind of where it is, which is interesting because that's some of the only law we actually have in terms of case law. That's out of a federal district court. There are elements of that law that quite honestly could have been appealed and may successfully have been appealed. I think one of the pieces of that was that, unless you were talking about somebody actually paying money for tokens, that there wasn't a sale of securities, then, that covered all kinds of incentive compensation stuff that we deal with when you've got people who are part of token projects. So candidly, I'm not even sure that was decided the right way, but that's now what we've got. In terms of what it says on a go forward basis, I don't think it's any secret that, the government is trying very hard to now actually understand the technology, listen to the industry, come up with rules that make sense. It's not easy to do. The Genius Act, candidly, is low hanging fruit. It's a really discrete kind of topic and relatively easy to do. Clarity is much, much harder because you're dealing with a technology that just isn't that old that most people don't understand. But regardless, I think stepping away from kind of having secondary sales as securities when you've got a token that's not otherwise a security is a good move, and that's what's happening. So that big thumbs up there.
I think so as well. I think it's really great to finally come to a conclusion. This has been years of litigation, and a ton of money that this could have been has really been brought to almost barely nothing in the grand scheme of what they ultimately got from them. Obviously, the legal fees, different.
Your legal fees, I understand, were north of $2 billion.
Yeah. Jeez, that's wild.
Yeah.
So I would say there's no losses in all of this, but I know that Ripple is happy that all of this is over. But as Josh mentioned, like with the administrative change, like clearly there's way more emphasis on being a lot more crypto friendly, and I think putting this to bed as a first step for more to come. But I also think what's going to be interesting to see what comes out on the other side of this is if other companies like Ripple basically go look at their model and try to push the envelope bigger, faster, lobby hard. Because one of the things that Ripple's been really good at is lobbying and doing a lot of money in that direction. So by doing that, are you now going to see this gigantic influx of other companies beginning to do the same? And I think the answer is yes.
Well, Ripple did contribute $4.9 million to the inauguration campaign. I didn't even know you could donate to the inauguration campaign, but they did. But Josh, I want to go back to it really quick. The SEC still has a job to do. They get crucified in the crypto industry, but there is massive fraud. There are bad actors in this space. So does this let the SEC do a job that everybody wants them to do?
Well, they're focusing on that, or at least that's the language, and I have every reason to believe them. They are still going after fraud, and I think the industry wants them to go after fraud. Fraud, obviously, throws mud at the entire industry. Most people don't really distinguish the fraudsters from the non-fraudsters because a lot of times they don't understand the technology, anyways. There's still people in the country that go Bitcoin is just for drugs and murder for hire. Obviously, that's not what BlackRock thinks, but nonetheless. So, yeah, I mean, from that perspective, that's what we want them to do. The catch is that there are some very difficult kind of logistical, conceptual elements that this technology causes. And just to give you kind of the kind of prime example in my mind, and one of the easier ones to understand. If you have a project that has a token outstanding, and the token's, your typical non-financial oriented utility token that provides access to some type of DApp application, that's great. Except that if, the company running the DApp now says, you know what, we're going to give back to the token community and find a way to use 20% of our revenue to buy tokens off the open market. Okay, well, that's a securities move. That sounds like a stock buyback. You're increasing the value of the tokens through anti-dilution. And now you've got a question of like, okay, what are the people who go and buy that token really thinking? Is that a security? Is that not a security? It's a very tough question. None of us know exactly how to deal with that particular item.
Well, there is a lot to grapple with, and we're kind of trying to hit on those points today. So let's transition into Senator Warren. I'm going to say the W word. It's a bad word in crypto, but let's talk legislation. So Senator Elizabeth Warren has made recent remarks in an interview with MSNBC, expressing concerns that current regulations are insufficient to address the economic risks and corruption, criticizing the Genius and Clarity Acts for lacking strong consumer protections and oversight. So here's her points, which may seem fair to some. She emphasized the need for regulations aligned with existing securities laws and anti-money laundering rules. She called for clear restrictions on elected officials owning or trading cryptocurrencies to prevent conflicts of interest, and said lawmakers, not crypto industry insiders, should craft these rules. So, Josh, I know there's been a lot of back and forth about the Genius and Clarity Acts. The Genius Act, of course, did pass. The Clarity Act, as you mentioned previously, is much more complicated and is in the mix of a bunch of different rulemaking that's also happening. But are you seeing the same weaknesses in these acts that Warren has pointed out?
So there are no perfect solutions. And I want to be really careful about how I answer this so I don't create a soundbite. You can always point to regulation and say it's not good enough in a particular area. And, you're probably going to be right. But what you're not saying is that to make it better in that area, you have to make it worse in a different area. And the reality is that she has been, banging a drum for quite some time that would make it almost impossible for the industry to function and the technology to grow. And, I don't know her personally, and I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but it's very hard to think that there's not no ulterior motive here as well. We know that she was certainly a fan of Gary Gensler, and he was a spectacular hypocrite. That one I do know because I'm a securities attorney and I listened to what he said. So, I find it very hard to give her any kind of credibility whatsoever. And, as I say that, for what it's worth, I am restraining myself from saying what I really think. So that's my thoughts as to Senator Warren.
Yeah, I just looking at this, and I'll just address the concerns and stay in that lane. And there are some points, just thinking out loud from the idea of right before becoming president, launching a token, and like, what does that mean? And can that happen for future senators, future House reps, future like that? That does open up a can of worms. That probably should have some regulation around it. So uh, not an invalid uh, thought, but there are other parts in it, just like you said, Josh, where like no matter what you put in there from a regulatory standpoint, there's always going to be more that can be done, etc. But also on the other side, you look at just the regular stock market and looking how some of these politicians trade there, and it's like kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth in some capacity. So it just needs to be consistent with the messaging.
She didn't mention campaign finance as one of the evils that the law is not protecting against.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah. So I think you take everything with a grain of salt. There's no matter how you're looking at this, yes, does it need to continue to be refined and cleaned up? Sure. But to address, I don't think addressing all the concerns that she has is necessarily on a level playing field. And I'll just kind of like leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I don't want to run us out of time, but we live in a country that has certain ideals about, kind of individuality, and, she's big government, and you've got a technology that is a naturally libertarian leaning technology. I mean, the whole point is to allow a functionality that previously had to involve government to no longer involve government. So, of course she's going to go that way. Anyways.
Well, these things have been going pretty fast. Genius Act went through, and the Clarity Act is now in the Senate to be reconciled before it gets signed and put into law. So let's just hope we have some of these discussions, right? She's bringing up her points, and there are many valid points, considering, if 14% or less of Americans hold crypto, that doesn't mean they all understand what it is, right? So maybe we take a little more time, because that's a small minority of the country really making these big decisions for our entire economy. So hopefully we'll hear some good debate going on in the Senate, and that the crypto industry can, really engage in useful ways in that conversation. All right, well, let's move on, because all of this is in this kind of whirlwind of policy, executive orders, SEC, and that brings us to the White House crypto report. We talked about it a bit when it first came out a couple weeks ago, but it is huge. There's lots of perspectives and stuff in there that could turn into regulations at the SEC. It could turn into executive orders. It could turn into legislation. There's lots of levels to it. So, Josh, from your reading of that report and some of the main points, are there any standouts that you want to highlight from your law perspective?
Yeah, I mean, there's one really massive one that I think is above and beyond everything else, and that is that somebody's paying attention to tax. There are statements within that report, which, by the way, if you look in my background, you can see the thing sitting there on my sofa. I'm like, thumbing through it consistently. But there are statements there that, show an understanding that if we don't get the taxation right, we're not going to innovate in this space. And, at this point, candidly, the securities piece of it is a little bit old hat. And I think we know where we're going on that. The tax piece is still scary in all kinds of different ways. And again, it's just, you're looking at this technology and all the things you can do with it, and it creates so many repercussions that may or may not be taxable events, may or may not be treated in certain types of tax characterization. And, many of my clients will run into that, and it's like, well, it's a really big deal how it's treated. Do we have any idea how this is going to be treated? And we can apply what I would consider common sense to it and try to like kind of get the policies that are there, but we don't know. And certainly there's been more than a few times where tax has not looked like, commonsensically what it should look like. So the report indicated that there's an understanding there. So that I thought was the biggest thing in it.
Yeah, I think the other part of the report that kind of just stuck out to me is thinking about like what does it mean from like a rights standpoint for people with crypto, and how Uncle Sam's always going to find a way to get theirs through the taxation and everything else, but the ownership piece and like what does that element of it mean, and then I think they went deeper into the idea of if these are digital assets, but they're differentiated from again being stock, like is this now a new class that needs its own like ramifications and things within that, and like really looking deeper into that and setting a framework that can be grown into the future. And I just like that the lens is now open to conversations around like really figuring that out and going deeper into like just that concept. And I'm optimistic about what's to come out of that side of it, but like there's definitely going to be way more emphasis on like basically how can Uncle Sam make sure they get their cut. And so, yeah, I think you're spot on, Josh.
Well, Josh, a follow-up question. Because of all these things happening at once, right? This report's trying to weave a lot of things together that we're seeing act out in the other agencies and legislation. From your perspective, though, what is the right order of operations? You said, you liked the tax thing. So is it establish what the tax classifications are, then do what? Help the SEC, then make legislation about what? Are you seeing like something that makes sense to you about how the order of operations should go in enacting all this rulemaking?
Yeah, I wish it worked that way.
Doesn't it? Come
Yeah,
on.
really. I'm not, I'm not historically, Washington DC politics, government process guy. But in the last couple of years, I've been paying much more attention, and I've been somewhat shocked at how messy our law, kind of creation process is, how difficult it is, how much it is, candidly thrown in some cases to just kind of random elements. So, yeah, I'd love to be able to say that there's this particular special order that everything can go in, but the reality is, I just want the people in their particular roles focusing on the right particular things. It's a sloppy process. There will be elements of it that are going to end up being contradictory and need time to be ironed out, and that's the price we pay for our particular system. So I think just a general kind of sense of having standards rather than rules take over. This is kind of one of those great law school things. You talk about rules and standards, and the standard is, don't get into a car accident, and the rule is stop at a red light. That works because a red light's this bright line thing, and don't get into a car accident is not really something that's enforceable. But where we are now in digital asset land, we don't have rules that make sense. There's nothing as easy as stop at a red light. So, I hope that, the administrative bodies and the courts look at things and kind of go, okay, what makes sense? Don't rip people off. Great. Did you rip somebody off? Then that's bad. Did you not? Then that's not bad and shouldn't be punished just because there's a rule that got tripped. And some of the administrative bodies have been great on this. I mean, the CFTC historically has taken exactly that approach. They've taken the approach of, hey, maybe somebody should register for a license, but there's no path for them to do it. We haven't created that, so they haven't gone and enforced against people. So that's what I would hope. And I know I got a little far away from your question, but nonetheless.
No worries. I was trying to put the screws in you on there and have you actually tell me something, but you're doing lawyer speak. It's almost like politician speak.
Yeah, well, there are plenty of lawyers who become politicians, I guess.
No, thank you for the perspective. And I do ask those questions, so it's great to have, you on here and someone with has all this knowledge around this area. So forgive me. Well, let's move on. We got one more story that is interesting. Just announced, I think yesterday, but Circle launched their own blockchain. So Circle, the issuer of the USDC stablecoin, is launching its own layer one. It's called ARC, and it's designed specifically for stablecoin finance and enterprise use. But with Circle's control and integrated features, ARC is a permission blockchain. So if it's a permission blockchain, is it still crypto?
Yeah. So crypto by itself is a difficult word, but it's not decentralized for sure. And basically what you've got is, Circle, which, just had their IPO, was very successful, is making a play to take all of the revenue taking opportunities that run along any kind of a distributed ledger oriented system. USDC is already, not immutable in the sense that Bitcoin is, for instance. They have the ability to finagle transactions, and, what they can't do right now, it's not on their own rails. And so they're putting out rails, but it's permissioned, so they control those rails. I mean, the whole point of decentralization is this idea of Byzantine fault tolerance, so that, no particular bad actor has the ability to change things. And that's not what they're doing. And, it's unfortunate that, you can spend a lot of money on marketing and a lot of people don't understand what's happening. So they may get some level of success, and, the government is definitely going to back them. I question maybe whether they're getting really close to the idea of being equivalent to a CBDC, central bank digital currency, which, there's plenty of legislators out there that want to absolutely forbid that from taking place. So, I'm concerned that this is a backdoor CBDC.
Richard, what do you think?
I agree. I think this is from a stable coin boom that's inevitably happening right now and where the future is headed. I think this is the case study that's going to be the first domino to topple everything and move everything to really being CBDCs. For example, Circle's killing it, just like Josh said. Had one of the best performing IPOs. Just did their first reports, and they absolutely crushed expectations. And basically, they figured out hey, instead of using this ETH where we're getting some of our fees taken away, if we just put this on ours, our margins can go up even further, because again, they have to do their reports, they have to have their constituents, they have to figure out how can they continue to raise the bar. And a great way to do that is what if we have our own chain and basically all the money comes to us? Great way to do it. However, you're no longer decentralized. And again, the whole point of cryptocurrency is decentralization, just like Josh was getting into. So from a core principle standpoint, we're getting away from it, and now we're getting into capitalism. So if the use case works, what stops JP Morgan Chase to do the same thing and all these other banks?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing. And so again, I think if this goes through and it works, this is the first domino for so many others to do the same thing.
Wow, a lot to unpack there, but yes, this is the corporate rise from the L1s, I guess. So let's wrap up, though. Thank you so much, Josh, for joining us. We covered a lot today. You can join in on our conversation anytime on socials and let us know what you think.
Great being here. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for joining us. I'm Richard, and I'm here with Josh and January. And I want you to stay curious, keep pushing boundaries, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's coming next on the Edge of Show. Thanks, everyone.